Great. Well, thank you all for joining us for Explore the National Parks of Southern United States. The entire southern section of the U.S. was at one time under a great inland sea. In this edition of our National Park series, our tour guide, Steve Farrar, will be showing the myriad of ways that earlier submersion has resulted in the fantastic geographic features on display in our southern national parks. The largest marine fossil reef on Earth makes up two of our parks, one above ground and one below. We will also visit the largest gypsum field on the planet, examine the densest concentration of petrified logs found anywhere, and go climbing in the only national park to entirely contain a complete mountain range. Hopefully I got all that right, Steve. So Steve has visited all 63 of our country's national parks, including hiking to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, scuba diving the coral reefs of the Virgin Islands, camping around the wolves on Isle Royale, scaling rock faces in Yosemite, and climbing to the summits of Mount Rainier and Denali. So all 50 of us or so, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Steve for joining us here this morning. And Steve, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Robert. Well, today we're going to go down south. We're going to hit two parks in each of three different states, New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. So thank you for coming along for the ride. But actually, before we get started, I've been remiss in answering one of the questions that came up a while ago. Back when we were covering the parks of the central US, I had mentioned in one of my slides that Mammoth Cave had been designated not only as a national park, but had international acclaim as a World Heritage Site and an International Biosphere Reserve. So the question came up, well, what's the difference? Well, good job, you stumped me. I didn't know, but I did my homework. And here's the brief answer. I don't want to take too much time on it, but actually they're both United Nations designations. UNESCO, which is United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization is what it stands for. UNESCO is the organization that listed both of those sites. World Heritage Sites have some kind of physical or cultural significance. As of today, there are over 1,154 such designations, and anybody can apply for them. Two different, either cultural or natural. The green dots are the natural sites. So you can see, obviously, Europe and the Mid-East have a lot of cultural sites. There is a World Heritage Committee that meets once a year, and they dole out the designations, and what rides along with that are access to funds. You can apply for some grants, so there's money involved with such a designation. So World Heritage Sites can get money from United Nations, as can the biosphere reserves. These are designated by the official Director General of UNESCO, and there are fewer. There's about 700 of them around the world, but also make the location eligible for monies to be supplied by UNESCO. So conservation of biodiversity with its sustainable use. So somebody in the Mammoth Cave area has figured out the grant process and applied for both designations successfully. So hope that helps. I can't remember, I'm sorry, who asked that question, but that's the distinction. They're both international designations from the United Nations. So that's so much for our housekeeping. Let's get on to the national parks. We'll start down in White Sands in New Mexico. This is a fun trip, actually. If you fly into El Paso, you can do basically a long weekend. You can cover all three national parks in the area. It's a couple-hour drive from El Paso up to White Sands. You go over the mountains, over to Carlsbad, which is virtually physically adjacent to the Guadalupe Mountains, and then back to El Paso. So literally in a 4-day swing, you can spend a day in each of the parks if you want. They're rather clustered there. White Sands is a recent one. It's our 62nd of the 63 parks. This was unfortunately one of the ones following the end around procedures to make it a national park. It was doing quite nicely as a national monument for years, since 1933. A couple of years ago, the legislative representatives in New Mexico wanted the area upgraded to national park status to maybe get some more tourist dollars in. So they added a one-liner into a Defense Authorization Act, which has nothing to do with the National Park Service. But the president had to sign, in order to fund the Defense Department, had to sign the bill as is, and it included a reclassification of White Sands National Monument to now be known as White Sands National Park. So there was actually no discussion or vote in Congress about it. It just was passed into law. White Sands, now this is an old map actually because it labels National Monument, but it does show the San Andreas Mountains to the west of the Tularosa Basin. The San Andreas Mountains are the source of the gypsum, which is a very common mineral actually. It gets eroded and the jet stream runs from west to east, so it blows down out of the mountains and collects in the parabolic dunes there in the middle. There's another, I think it's the Franciscan mountain range to the east, and what forms in the middle is a basin. So it's essentially the northern end of the Chihuahuan Desert, which runs mostly in Mexico, but the northern end comes up over the line. The gypsum powder is actually, it's common. It's very soft. It's not as granular as if you went to the beaches here, on Cape Cod. They're made of quartz, and quartz is much more granular. This is almost flaky in nature. It's a softer mineral, and it's held in place because it is a desert, but the water table resides not very. You could almost put a shovel in the soil and come up with water down at the base. The water can be as close to 1 to 2 feet beneath the surface. So there can be plants that reach their roots down low enough. So there's vegetation. The southern end of the dunes that are there are in fact stabilized by these vegetations that can reach the water. But as the dunes get taller, they can't, the roots can't reach the water, so there's less and less of it. Gypsum is white, looks like snow actually, and it shifts with the wind. So there's essentially one road in the entire national park, Dunes Drive. It's an 8-mile drive that runs north to south from the visitor center way up into the dune field. So that's what it looks when you're driving through there. And they literally, I was there early in the morning, and there's our road grader, which goes out every morning because the dunes drift down over it. So to keep the road open, they're not plowing snow, they're plowing gypsum. But you're driving right on the surface of it. So if you're going out there, I was there in August, and it gets very, very hot. It was over 105 degrees. So if you're out there in the summer, first thing in the morning is a good time to hike before it heats up. I was the only one there. I drove out there sunrise out in the desert. This is the sign. There's only one trail in the entire park. It's about an 8-mile hike. No shade, obviously. There's no vegetation, so you're out very exposed. Bring your you'll see my goofy hat because it was 100 degrees. So I left my vehicle all by its lonesome in the parking lot and headed out to hike this trail. Well, the sands shift and there's no stable route through the dunes. So in order to mark the trail so that you stay on point, they have markers. That's my hiking staff. So it's about 5, maybe 6 feet tall to give you an idea of the height of the markers. But the dunes shift depending on the winds. So they can move 20, 30 feet in either direction, depending on which way the winds are driving the loose sand or gypsum. This trail marker is as tall as the other one, but it's being swallowed up by the dune. The dune's growing around it. So only the top 6 inches or so was showing. So it's kind of tricky to stay on the route. Not the best park in terms of wildlife sightings. There's not too many critters that like the middle of the desert. There's a bleached lizard that you might come across scurrying around out there. I always don't count on GPS when you're out in wilderness areas. Bring your map, your compass, so that you know where your orientation is. I set the compass on the peak of one of the dunes that I was walking along, just to give you an idea. There's no reference points. There's no buildings. There's no paved paths or anything to show you magnitude up or down, how big things are. So there's my compass along one of them. Magnificent. It's hard to take a bad picture when you're out there. They're glorious. And as as you get further and further out, there's less vegetation. There's absolutely nothing else out there. So you're looking for these markers to stay on track. You hike out and out. It's probably the one of the more strange sensations in the lower 48. It's very difficult to completely get into the wilderness unless you're up in the Maine woods or something. I hiked for maybe 3 to 4 hours on this trail. Not only didn't I not see anyone, I didn't hear any noise, human-made noise. There's no cars, there's no airplanes. It's right outside a missile testing ground, so it's not on too many airline routes flying over it. But the complete absence of any man-made noise is a rarity in the lower 48. So it was very noteworthy for the solitude. If you want to be alone, this is a great place. As I did head back after making the loop, I was joined. This is a very similar experience. Maybe 95, 98% of the people that come to White Sands National Park are coming for one reason: to slide down the sand dunes. It's very similar to Great Sand Dunes National Park up in Colorado, where that's the fun activity. Families come, they turn the kids loose, and you can have flying saucers or just slide down on your butt or something. There's dunes, and that's the fun activity. So what the heck, when in Rome, right? The motel that I was staying at in the nearby town assumes that anyone coming there is going to the dunes, to the park, to slide down the dunes. So they give you free flying saucers. If you stand there, there's a stack of them that you can take. So there's my saucer. The outfit that I'm wearing, I'm a redhead and I don't tan, I burn. So when out in a completely treeless desert environment, I have to cover up. That outfit, which has a matching pant set to it, actually, I bought in a hunting store up in Alaska. It's for sneaking up on doll sheep, I guess, up on snow country, but it works well for keeping the rays of the sun off of your skin. So you can slide down. There's all kinds of different ways to visit the park because of the constant heat. You have rising thermals. hot air ballooning in Arizona is the thing to do. That's one way to see from above. Those are the western, this is sunset, so that's looking west at the San Andreas Mountains, the source of the gypsum. And if you camp, there's precious few campsites that are available, and they're reservable in advance, so you have to do some planning to get one of the dozen or so campsites. But if you do, this is a sunset looking out the flap of your tent. It's rather impressive. So that's White Sands. White Sands. Now, if you drive from New Mexico up and over the San Franciscan mountains toward the east, you have to go up and over in Lincoln National Forest. You go through the town of Cloudcroft. Just a suggestion, if you're going to make that after 105-degree heat of hiking in during the day, they have an awesome craft brewery there, Cloudcroft Brewing Company, which happens to make exquisite pizzas as well. So pizzas and a wide assortment of craft beers. It's put it on your must do, in my opinion, as a place to stop while traversing. And if you do have the time to make a little side trip, you can head north for about 45 minutes from there, and it brings you to Roswell, New Mexico. If you're not pressed for time, a very, very bizarre little town. It's home of the International Ufo Museum. Very fun place to visit. You get all kinds of characters there. I took a picture of some women from this group of 4 women came over from London, and they were totally into it. They had tinfoil hats on and stuff, and they were if that's your thing, if you want to learn about UFOs, you go to Roswell. Anyway, that's on the way over to get to the east side of the mountains, which is where Carlsbad Caverns is. That's our next national park. Carlsbad is just above the Texas-New Mexico border. And it's in New Mexico, but as you can see, 20 miles down the road is Guadalupe Mountains National Park. It's the exact same geological feature for both of the parks. It's the largest coral reef anywhere on the planet. I'll go into that a little bit more when we go down to Guadalupe Mountains, but it's a limestone. It used to be the floor of an inland sea, and where it's underground, it gets dissolved into the caverns. I was there in 2021. The elevators were closed off COVID-wise for one-way traffic just to get up and out. So the only way down into it was to walk the natural entrance. So you're going down, it's 750 feet. You go down, down, down to get down into the cave. And normally you would think, you would get there by taking the elevator. You think, oh, I'm going to be claustrophobic, going 700 feet down underground. This is going to be like a mine shaft or something. Could not be further from the truth. If you take the elevator down, you zip down there and you step out, and it's Shazam. There's ticket sales for ranger-led tours over in this area, and there's a gift shop over here, and there's a cafeteria over, all with fluorescent lighting and stuff. It's this big wide open space. It's not constricting at all. So there are places you can get to in the caves that your claustrophobia will come up, but not when in the entrance hall there. So you you go in. If you're taking the tour, and you can do self-guided, you can get a headset, and as you walk along the path, explanations will come in where the rangers will tell you what you're looking at. It's pretty cool. So it's self-guided. This one image is in the big room. I don't know what the zoning is in Tewksbury or in your town, since we have people from all communities all over the place. Maybe quarter-acre lots or half-acre lots. One room in Carlsbad Caverns, the big room, is over 8 acres large. It is, you can stand in one place and spend an hour just shifting your head around, looking at the formations. It's unbelievable. It's the largest cave chamber anywhere in North America. 8 acres in one room. I bought this poster. This is called The Big Shot. If you look, I don't know if I can move my, yeah. You can see the people in the way in the back there, different tours throughout. This picture is known as The Big Shot. It was taken in 1952. This guy Tex Helm was a one hell of an engineer and photographer. Remember back in the good old days when you had the little cubes that you would, the flash cubes you would put on your cameras? Those of you old enough to remember that. The 4-sided ones would flip around and you got 4 flash pictures from each bulb. Well, prior to that, the super flash bulbs, you got 1 shot from each bulb. Then you had to replace the flash bulb. That was what was Tex had. He lit up 55 million square feet of surface in the big room to take this picture. He wired them all together so that simultaneously 2,400 number 2 super flash bulbs all went off in one instance. A lot of technical know-how to make that happen. Through his 30 years of experience, he knew how to do it. It's never been attempted before or since, but that's what this poster is that you can buy in the gift shop there. From 1952, nowadays you have lighting that's all wired and stuff, but I thought that was worthy of commemorating the Big Shot. So as you now tour the big room, Will Rogers took a tour of it. He said, this is like being in the Grand Canyon, but it's got a roof on it. It is absolutely spectacular. The number of different types of formations. Sure, you have your stalactites and stalagmites, and where they join, you have columns, very massive columns. You just go on and on and on through. There's reflection pools where you're looking at actually the ceiling, perfectly reflected in a still water. You know exactly what you're getting. Constant year-round, never changes a degree in either direction. It's 56 degrees, so wear your light sweater and you'll be comfortable throughout. You can spend a lot of time walking around or just sitting and meditate. I think they rent this room out for weddings. You can have a destination wedding and be married down in Carlsbad Caverns. There are other, in addition to the self-guided tour, you can take ranger tours. This is the King's Palace. Access is another area not allowed on the self-guided. This is where part of the Jules Verne Journey to the Center of the Earth movie was filmed. There's a separate left-hand tunnel that takes you into an area that's not developed. There's no paved paths or anything. It's a little rougher. No electricity. You're carrying your candle lights and stuff. And they do sit you around to give you an idea of what would happen should you happen to be exploring this by candlelight and you trip and your candle goes out. Good luck to you. The degree of inkiness when you blow out all the candles, you could have your hand 2 inches in front of your face and no possible way can you see a thing. So early explorers had to have a means of relighting their candle in case that it did happen. If you are a spelunker and you don't have claustrophobia issues, you can take the Hall of the White Giant. This way you have to get dirty and crawl around with knee pads and helmets and stuff onto less readily accessible parts of the cave. Or if you're really into it, you take the Spider Cave tour. This is not for me. I do get claustrophobia. They actually have a mock-up up in the visitors center with cement blocks where the configuration is of the opening of the blocks is the size of the tightest squeeze on the tour. You have to prove to them that you can fit through that opening before they'll sell you a ticket to take this. You don't want to find out halfway through that, oh, this is a little too tight, I can't fit through. And you must not have fear of closed spaces. I don't know. Some people that appeals to. Above the ground, there's not an awful lot to see. It's the Chihuahuan Desert, but there's 73 square miles in the park. There are Carlsbad Caverns is one single cave. There are 94 separate caves that have been discovered within the confines of the park. And they're still finding more. Slaughter Canyon is the only other one where there's ranger tours. The visitor center up at off the Route 62, 180 is the main entrance, but you can make arrangements on Fridays and Sundays to meet the guides. You drive yourself down to Slaughter Canyon, and there's a similar rustic tour. No electricity or paved walkways and stuff. It's a more rudimentary cavern exploration. The superstar of all the known caves is Lechuguilla. Lechuguilla is the deepest. Carlsbad goes down 750 feet. Lechuguilla is over 1,600 feet deep. It's the deepest cave in the continental US. They have mapped 142 miles. This is 1,600 feet down. Very, very few people are allowed there. It is so isolated and so pristine that among the credentials to gain access to it, not only do you have to be a certified caving spelunker, but you also have to have your scientific credentials in order, because you have to wear clean suits and everything. They don't want it being contaminated from up above because it's so pure. So it's not an area that's seen by all that many people, but that's within the confines of Carlsbad Cavern National Park. Above ground, like I say, it's just the desert. The reason I went in 2020 was because I had only previously been there during the winter when driving out. You stop in, and the bats that are famous for pouring out of the cavern, they winter down in Mexico or Central America, the Brazilian bats. That's how the cave was found. The kids that saw the cloud thought that there was a fire going on. It turned out to not be smoke. It was thousands and thousands of bats pouring out of the natural entrance to the cave that the kids saw back in 1898. So they live in the bat cave off to the side. You come down the natural entrance, the same passageway that the bats come up in the evenings, but you hang a left and go down the main corridor. There's a bat cave off to the right there where they sleep all day hanging on the surface, but then at night they go out to hunt. And I don't know who does the counting, but there are just tens of thousands of them that pour out of there. It's a great place to camp out in the desert there, because adult bats will eat their own body weight's worth of mosquitoes on any given night out hunting. With that number of bats, there aren't too many mosquitoes in the area, so that's not an issue if you're out camping under the stars. You don't have bugs bothering you. 17 different species, they come pouring out. It's supposed to be a memorable experience. The night I was there in August waiting for it, and they have a AM radio station where a ranger will hold forth and kind of narrate as the flow happens. Not one single bat came out of the entrance. This was in the middle of the summer. The bats are sensitive to change in pressure. So if there's a low pressure system coming that's indicating that there's going to be inclement weather, maybe a thunderstorm coming, they pass on going out to hunt that night. So even though the sky was clear, the bats knew that the bad weather was coming, and they chose to not go out. The one night I was there to see the bats show, nobody came out. So it's not a guarantee if you go in the summer that you're going to see them. They're more sensitive to changes in atmospheric pressures than we are. So I didn't get to see the bats. Now, Guadalupe Mountains is the same reef. The yellow and red here is the biggest marine fossil reef anywhere on the planet. It's bigger than the Australian coral reef in its length, but the yellow portion is above ground, and that's down underneath. It's the red parts that are up above. The soil has been eroded around the red parts, so they're sticking up. The yellow parts are underground. So the yellow in Carlsbad is where the limestone has been eroded. When it juts up out of the ground, you have mountains. You have Guadalupe Mountains, the Apache Mountains, and the Glass Mountains, where it's exposed. So that's what the coral reef looks like when the soil around it has been eroded and it's exposed. That's El Capitan. El Cap is the lower end of the mountain range. It's not the highest point. Guadalupe Peak is up higher, but El Cap sits right near the interstate. So if you're driving the southern route from east to west, you can see it for 100 miles away. It sticks way up. The dunes, the desert's surrounded on three sides by the Chihuahuan Desert. So you can hike. Most of the park is just sand dunes and cactus and desert. But then you can see the interstate there going around the southern end of El Capitan. It's a very striking landmark. You can see it for quite a ways away. Nevada Bar, if you like whodunit mystery novels, Nevada Bar, B-A-R-R, was a ranger, a national park ranger up in Rocky Mountains, I think, initially, but she bopped around to different parks. She started a series of mystery novels, each one of which takes place in a national park. So they're kind of fun. If you've been to the park before, it's easy to get into the story because, oh, I know where she's talking about. I've been on that trail or something. The very first novel that she wrote was called Track of the Cat, and it takes place in Guadalupe Mountains National Park. It was about mountain lions. The large mammals here have all been hunted to extinction. You're not going to see bison or elk or wolves are gone. Grizzly bears are gone. There are some around. There's deer. There are some smaller black bears still in the woods. A lot of raptors, javelinas, wild pigs are there and stuff. There are wildlife, but not the big species. Northeast corner of the park, you can hike out into Mcadridge Canyon, which is interesting because as you gain elevation, it's an island that's a very different climate from what's lower elevation, the cactus that grow in the desert. As you go up higher, you get surrounded by deciduous trees that you would normally associate with northern forests, but because the elevation is higher, they have different climates. So it's just an odd to see foliage down in what should be a desert is odd. It's a sky island, they're called. So you get a good view from Mcadridge Canyon if you spend a day hiking up into there. I chose to go up to Guadalupe Peak, and again, this was after being in White Sands and Carlsbad. It doesn't come into play. It's 56 degrees all day down in the cave, but it was 105 degrees up above. So again, I started early. There's the parking lot in the middle of the picture there where I left my car, and I had already hiked for an hour before sunrise. So it was a cooler part of the day to hike. That's what passes for a trail. You're walking along. You can see fossils in it's a coral reef that you're hiking on. So I was there when the prickly pear had its fruit in bloom. This is collected by the locals, and they mash it up they make prickly pear jam out of it, out of the fruit of the prickly pear cactus. Now, I hiked up and I hiked solo, and I wanted a picture with me in it, so I waited for this guy and his son were hiking along behind me, and I wanted them to take my picture. I'm above El Capitan there, and the view was beautiful, but I wanted El Cap in the background, so I waited for them to catch up and asked them to take a picture, and he goes, "Boy, you're keeping quite a pace. We've been following those damn yellow socks for the last 2 hours." And I said, "Well, would you forget that you had seen them?" He goes, "Not a chance. What the hell are you wearing those for?" I said, "Well, I'm 67. I'm hiking by myself. It's 100 degrees. And if something happens, the cavalry's not coming. I've told the rangers when to expect me down, but if I turn an ankle or something, I'm up here on my own." I said, "The rangers would ask people coming down subsequently, 'Hey, did you see a dude with yellow socks?' And trust me, you're not going to forget that you saw those." The guy says, I had no idea, never thought of that." He says, "What a brilliant idea." So that's why I'm wearing those neon yellow socks, is so that people will remember that they saw me. Because there are dangers when you're hiking around up there. It is the desert, and you've got critters that if you choose to sit down and rest, you don't know who else is in the area. One of the most bizarre wildlife pictures I've ever taken in all my park travels was this. This was on the side of the trail. If you look to the left, every inch of the limestone was covered by ladybugs. And if you look to the right of the trail, the vegetation that was there, this was one serious family reunion. There were ladybugs all over the place. I've never looked into what the attraction is or what. Nowhere higher or lower in elevation were there any noticeable. But at this one point in the trail, and everybody up on top at the summit, everybody that was up there was, "Did you see all those ladybugs and stuff?" I mean, you couldn't miss it. I don't know what the attraction was, why they gathered in one spot, but it was very bizarre. Anyway, here I am at the highest point in Texas, 8,700 feet. You stick a marker up on top of it, and you can see for quite a ways in every direction. Afternoon light. That's El Cap down below me. And if you stay up on top for sunset, you get some pretty good views as well. So anyway, that's some of the activities that you can do in Guadalupe Mountain National Park. If you stay up on top, those aren't clouds, that's the Milky Way. You're up above where any human-made light would wash out stars, and once the sun goes down, it's very, very impressive. The dry desert air opens up. You just never knew that there were that many stars around. So the second national park in Texas is Big Bend. There are only two. This one's so Guadalupe Mountains is up there on the border with New Mexico. If you Big Bend is not on the way to anywhere. It's a destination trip. I flew into Midland, and it's about a 5-hour drive. Texas is a big state. I think it was a 5-hour drive down from Midland to get down to Big Bend. There are precious few areas of Texas that could be grabbed by the federal government and made into historic parkland. Texas used to be a republic before it was made a state, so all of the land was accounted for. So there's essentially no federal lands that can be just changed designation into a national park. So you don't have too many. As big as Texas is, there's only the 2 national parks. But what a national park it is. It's actually a threefer. It's three very, very different, distinct worlds within the boundaries of the one park. You have the river, which you can see there's the southern border of the park, comes down out of New Mexico, the Rio Grande, and it carves canyons, three very distinct canyons on its way to the Gulf of Mexico. So you have river ecosystems. 3/4 of the park, 80% of the park is desert. It's the Chihuahuan Desert that flows up from Mexico. So most of the park is desert, but right smack in the middle, the Chisos Mountains run from west to east. It's the only national park that entirely contains a mountain range. The Chisos Mountains are fully within the boundaries of the park. And they're not huge, it's 7,000 to 8,000 foot mountains, but that's a lot higher than the desert. So you have these sky islands and a very different climate. So within this one park, you have rivers and its adjacent flora, desert, and mountains, all in one park. Santa Elena Canyon is the most famous, the most accessible actually of the three canyons. This is one area where we don't need to build a border wall. Nature has taken care of it. Those are 1,500-foot walls that run for 40 miles that Mother Nature has carved a wall. So you can take raft trips down the Rio Grande, rafting trips, kayaking, paddle, canoe trips down 1,500 feet on either side. Obviously, springtime, there's more runoff, so the water is more conducive to less paddling, more ride the waves. That's where you come out at the end of the canyon, and it flows into desert and lowlands. It is a volcanic area. There's a shift where the plates come together. The Caribbean plate and the North American plate cause some fissures. There's volcanic activity. So there's not open flowing lava, but there's heat that comes up from down below. There are pools that sit at a constant 105 degrees that are cordoned off, and you can have a hot tub right out in the open water. This is not Santa Elena. This is Boquilla Canyon area. So the river section of the park is one type. I didn't even know there were 70 different species of cactus just within the park. You know, you get your little laminated field guides that show you the different backyard birds or shells of the Cape Cod or something. 70 different cactus species. If you're into that, you can take one heck of a hike out into the desert to identify all the different species of cactus that are found there. And if you go in about the third week of April, it will forever change your conception of what a desert's all about, because every living thing blooms. Late April, you'll see colors the likes of which you didn't learn in your fourth grade geography class. You were taught deserts are foreboding and dry, barren places. Well, not in late April. They're not. Everything bursts into color. It's beautiful. Prickly pears are cool. They grow like condos. They sprout out of each other. There's only one place to stay in the park. I guess there are some campgrounds, but for lodging, the Chisos Mountain Lodge is up in, oddly enough, the Chisos Mountains. Absolutely. Well, this is up in the middle of nowhere. It's at elevation, so this is one of the sky islands. There's a view from up above. The road dead ends there. It just drives up to the lodge, and that's it. That's Emery Peak off to the left there. That's the highest point. And if you hike up there, Again, I was there in April, could not go over on the backside because it was cordoned off. It's a nesting area for peregrine falcons. So you had to stay where they were not. Absolutely impossible to get a room reservation at the lodge from early April to the end of May. Good luck. It is completely sold out years in advance by birders. Birders, there are more birds in and through Big Bend than any other national park, which confused me because it's a desert. But the rationale is that all of the North American species of birds that migrate down to winter down in Mexico or Central America, well, when they reverse the migration in the springtime, and they may be Canadian geese going up to Hudson Bay or something, this is the neck of the funnel that all the birds come up north through. So they may not reside year round in Big Bend, but if you are in Big Bend and you're a birder, you can check off one heck of a lot of species sightings because it's along the migratory route. Species that you wouldn't find. These birding tours, so they'll come by the buses and lock into the lodge for days at a time to go out birding. They make up the largest percentage of visitors to Big Bend National Park are birders. Who knew? So they have the ranger-led birding tours because they know the nesting areas and stuff. They'll take birders out. I don't know. I just never knew that it was that popular an activity that there was that many people. So you can see different areas. The rangers know what species can be found in which ecosystems and stuff. And the Colima warbler, if you're a birder, you probably know the reference to it. It's not found anywhere else on Earth but here, and it's like this. The holy grail of birding is to sight one of these Colima warblers, and the first question the rangers get asked every April is, has there been a sighting yet of the Colima warbler? Like I say, you got to be a dedicated birder to have Google it sometime. You'll see what I'm making reference to. But there's the falcons on the backside. A lot of birds going through. And this is up in the mountains. It's still dry, so there are cactus up there and stuff. Reptiles and amphibians. I always assumed that someplace like the Everglades would be your mecca for species, variety of species of those. There are more native species of reptiles and amphibians in Big Bend, not by much, by one, more than in the Everglades that are found throughout the park. And now you know why cowboys wear tall leather boots. If you spend time hiking around there are rattlesnakes all over the place. Horned lizards, there's all kinds of things. There aren't too many mammals that you're going to run into. Most of them there are nocturnal because it's so very hot all day, every day. So they're more active at nighttime. But 75 different species of mammals in the park, including mountain lions. Mountain lions, now, the level of intelligence to put signs like this up, it has you scratching your head. What to do if you see a lion? Pick up small children. Like a parent would have to be told that, right? Do not run away. It's pretty bizarre. Anyway, it's nice to see that the critters pay attention to the bear crossing signs. The bear says, okay, I guess I can cross the road here. These guys, you got to have a keen eye to pick them out. The Bighorn sheep are up in the mountains, but they blend. The camouflage does them well. Sunset down in the desert area, or you could be up in the mountains and get a very different view of sunset. But Big Bend, a lot of people ask what's one of my favorite parks, and I, for different reasons, there are different. It depends on how you interpret favorite. But this was one park when I did visit it, I dramatically underestimated what was there. If some parks you can blow into in an afternoon and say, okay, check it off the list, been there, done that. Not Big Bend. You got to, number one, it's so far out of the way. As long if you're going to make the effort to go there, you might as well put some time into it. But you could easily spend a day in each of the different environments: the river, day rafting on the river, a day hiking up in the mountains, and then out in the desert. So if you're going to go to Big Bend, my suggestion is that you allot sufficient time to fully explore the park and stay there overnight in the desert. You'll see more stars than you ever thought existed. So that's New Mexico and Texas. I'm going to scoot over to Petrified Forest. I was there 2 weeks ago, actually. I went to the Four Corners area for a week and was driving around. So I spent a day going down to Painted Desert. This is probably one of the most accessible parks. It's right off of two different interstates, 180, and if you're driving the southern route across the US, Route 40, there's an exit for it. The Painted Desert, you get off and it's absolutely beautiful. There's overlooks. It's called Painted Desert because of the different colors of minerals that are on display. There's overlooks. You can look out there. The Painted Desert Inn no longer functions as an inn. It's now a National Historic Landmark. It's set up as a museum, actually, and you walk in. These are glass panes that let light in, and it's kind of hard to get a picture of them, but that's the ceiling of the museum inside. It's kind of neat. You got a great view, protected in the shade. This was 2 weeks ago. There was not a cloud to be seen, so the temperature got up into the high 90s, but they serve ice cream in the museum. So it's an awesome place to cool down, to go have a rest and sit at the outdoor table with that as your backdrop of the Painted Desert. It's kind of fun. As you drive down south from the northern section of the park, there's a 27-mile drive through the park. Averages are over 5,000 feet in elevation. So if you're going to get out and hike, it's not only at elevation, it's averages over 100 degrees every day. So you got to take precautions. There are petrified wood locations in other parts of the world. There's a forest over in Poland where there's some up in Teddy Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota. But this is the single most concentrated assemblage of petrified wood found anywhere on the planet. How it's made was back in the volcanic era. If you've seen pictures of Mount St. Helens from 1980 when the volcano blew its top, you may remember the timber that was mowed down like pickup sticks on the sides of the mountain because of the blast. Well, that's what happened here. When the volcanic activity happened, the conifers were blown down, but then with the subsequent, they're called lahars, mud flow happened. It washed the logs down into a jumble, and critically, they were then covered over by either ash or the falling silt over the years. And what that does is, normally organic material would just decay, but that slowed the transfer of oxygen because they effectively had a blanket over them that slowed the oxygen transfer. So over time, Mother Nature and water will find its way down. The water seeps down, would reach the organic material, and then as it eroded through, it would deposit the dissolved minerals in the water and pick up some carbon and wash it out. So over time, minerals replaced all the organic material until all that was left was solid rock. There's 2 or 3 different hikes that you can do. They refer to the greater concentrations of petrified wood as a forest. They're not standing, they're all down, but there's a paved path that you can walk through the crystal forest. Great place to bring a geology class. This is a field trip. What they're looking at is, it is absolutely stunning. You can see the annual rings, just like a regular tree. That's what you're looking at, but there's no organic anything. This is solid rock. It's minerals. That's the close-up. That's what they're looking at, are all the different dissolved minerals that make up the petrified wood now. Very, very big problem in the park is the fact that you're out there, they can't really monitor all the trails and stuff, and there's pieces of wood just lying around. The rangers estimate they have almost 1 million visitors a year, estimated that over 12 tons of petrified wood per year get picked up in little pieces, one at a time, and stuck in a backpack as a souvenir. You don't have to do that. They sell. Number one, there's petrified wood outside the borders of the park, so you can stop at highway souvenir stands and buy a piece of petrified wood. You don't have to steal it from the national park. But like I say, it's kind of hard to monitor, so you're not supposed to take things from national parks. If you go there, buy your souvenir at the gift shop. Some of the scenery as you're driving south, the teepees there. This is down at the south entrance. Look at it. Again, not a cloud in the sky. Sorry for the goofy hat, but again, I need the shade if I'm going to be out hiking for any length of time with that kind of sun exposure. This is a giant logs trail. I'm just kind of show you the size of these logs. They're 60 feet long, 10 feet in diameter. They're very large logs. And I asked the ranger about it. I said, who has the off the charts chainsaw that would hew through solid rock? He said, well, it looks man-made, but it's actually nature that does the partitioning of the logs. They'll find a crack, and over time the water gets down and it makes dead vertical cleavages of the rock. So those aren't cut up by man. That's Mother Nature partitioned the logs into bite-sized pieces, but you can't pick one up and walk away. They're solid rock. People have lived in the area for quite a while. This was newspaper rock or petroglyphs that they dated back 8,000 different years. So this is even predating the ancient Anasazis in the areas. And there's not a lot of building materials in the area. So if you lived out there, you had to, this is an agate house. Somebody in the Pueblo era reconstructed a adobe. They used the adobe mud to piece together pieces of petrified wood to make the agate house. But anyway, that's the roadside scenery view of hiking in Petrified Forest. Great place for sunset is up looking over the Painted Desert at the inn. And I know it's noon, but we got one more park to go. I'll go whip through Saguaro National Park. Saguaro was a national monument. Over half of our national parks began as national monuments and then got promoted or kicked upstairs for a variety of reasons to elevated from national monument status to national park. 1961, the Rincon Mountains are to the east of Tucson. 1961, Stuart Udall, Secretary of State, added the west side. So there's two portions of the park. Tucson, the town of Tucson, or city of Tucson, is in the middle. There's a Saguaro National Park East and a Saguaro National Park West. Tucson Mountains on the west, Rincon Mountains on the east. And you can literally walk from your motel up the path into the park. Or if you want, you can have your wedding there and use the saguaro as a very definitive backdrop. If you want to see saguaro cactus, you go to the Sonoran Desert. They're not found anywhere else in the world. So with a backdrop to your wedding pictures of that, readily identifies where you got married. There are several national parks that are pointedly designated exclusively for the preservation of a single species: Joshua Tree, Redwoods, Sequoia National Park. Saguaro is one of those. It was exclusively to keep people from cutting down or collecting the saguaros. This is over in the Rincon Mountain District. These are more of the sky islands that I mentioned. Down at the base, you have the desert, but then as you go up high into the mountains, you get pine and oak and deciduous trees, very different from the lower elevations, the Chihuahuan or the Sonoran deserts. And just in case you don't remember our 4 deserts, we have the Great Basin up in Nevada that flows to the south into the Mojave Desert, the Sonoran Desert, and then as we visited in Big Bend, the Chihuahuan Desert. Those are the 4 North American deserts. And this is a map of those sky islands that I mentioned. There are actually 27 of them scattered around southern United States. Very different. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. So you get different flora growing at elevation than you do lower. I don't know why you would want to mountain bike around here, because oops is not a good word when you have spiny cactus to the side. Again, late April, that's the time to go. The cactus, even these big giants bloom. They have huge blossoms. Go in April because it's a nice comfy 80 degrees instead of middle of the summer where it gets up close to 100. I think it's the state flower is the Saguaro Cactus bloom. These are huge flowers, but they're up almost 40 feet up off the deck. So they're not pollinated by, well, number one, they don't bloom during the daytime because the heat is so extensive that they would wilt. So these flowers bloom at night. They open up at night and they're very fragrant, and they attract bats. So bats are the ones, who can get up 40 feet and get attracted, and they get the pollen all over them as they flit around from flower to flower. And the flowers are sturdy enough that they can support the weight of the bats. So they're bat pollinated. The saguaro cactus can live up to a couple hundred years old. They grow upwards of 50 feet. The arms, the cartoonish arms, first appear, they got to be 50 to 70 years old before they grow their first arms. And it is fascinating to hike out in them and see the various iterations. They're just bizarre stuff that you don't see anywhere else. But in order to grow 50 to 70 feet tall and be sturdy enough, they actually have a skeleton. They have an interior woody skeleton that supports, and then the weight of the tree, and then that's peeled over by a waxy covering that keeps the water from inside the plant from evaporating. The waxy skin seals it off. Absolute engineering marvels. The network of, it doesn't rain very much in the desert. So the root system of a saguaro spreads out around it like a net. And when it does rain, it absorbs water from 30-foot radius around each plant, gets sucked up into the plant. Now, we have bark around trees that are solid. The saguaro, if you look at the vertical lines, they're like pleats of a corduroy. what that does is enable the plant, when it sucks up all the water, when it does rain, the plant can expand without bursting its outer covering, the bark. An adult saguaro can weigh upwards of 8 tons when it gets hydrated, when it sucks up all the water, and they can absorb up to 200 gallons per plant to make it through to the next. It only rains like 4 or 5 times a year. So when it does rain, it wants to make sure it captures as much of the water as they can. So it's a very unique plant. Not quite as many species as we found over in Big Bend, where there were 70 species, but there's 25 different species of cactus here in Saguaro, in addition to the saguaro. Lots of different lizards, reptiles. The the jackrabbits have big ears because they basically function as radiators. The blood circuit, the body heat gets up if you're outside and it's 100 degrees. What that does is allow the blood to flow up and around and escape the heat from the body in the fins, if you will, of the big ears of the jackrabbit. The western side of the park, you would think that it's the invasion from Mars. When you hike around out there, it's much more populated. This is why it got added as an additional section. It's like they fell out of the sky. They're just everywhere. They cover the hillsides and stuff. It's very memorable to take a hike out into the saguaro fields. You may see javelinas, the wild pigs are out there. As I mentioned before in Big Bend, again, the bighorn sheep, you got to keep a sharp eye out for if you're going to get to see them. Tortoises couldn't care less whether you're in the area. They just go about their business. They're just walking around. These guys you want to look out for, the Gila monsters. There aren't too many 3-foot long lizards around, and this one happens to, in addition to very, very strong jaws, they're poisonous. They inject a poison, so steer clear of Gila monsters. And they have their share of rattlesnakes in the area. If you're gonna hike out there, you gotta keep your wits about you, because you may pull yourself up onto the landing there to get a good view, but those flat surfaces that get warmed by the sun are where the rattlesnakes will lie out to warm themselves. They're cold-blooded, so they like warming areas. So before you put your hand up there to pull yourself up, you might want to check. But again, petroglyphs from early on, you can find evidence of as you hike just out in the desert. No shortage of awesome photo ops. This is early morning, actually. That's the mist from the accumulated dew overnight that's dissipating. Sunset shots, just every picture you take is postcard material. Beautiful place to go hang out. So that's our 6 parks. There is another National Park Service area down there. It's a little further south from Tucson. It's actually just over the border with Mexico. It's Oregon Pipe. It's a Oregon Pipe Cactus National Monument. It's a very different breed of cactus than the saguaro, but unfortunately, there's a giant sign at the entrance to this that warns U.S. citizens not to come in the park because it's not safe. It's on one of the routes that the smugglers use to come up from Mexico, and even though it's a national monument, it's not safe for U.S. citizens to go into the borders of our own national monument. They warn you against it. So anyway, that's our southern parks. Thank you for hanging in there and staying with us. I will be back in July. We're going to go the eastern parks, Maine to Florida, mainly along the coast, but we've got some Midwest, Ohio, and West Virginia entries into there. We're going to have 8 different parks that we'll visit on the eastern side, or more day tripping than major Western excursions. So stay tuned. Again, that's going to be July 28th. will be my next presentation here.
I'm
So if
looking
anybody
forward
has
to it.
any questions or comments,
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it, Steve. So folks, tomorrow you'll receive an email with a feedback survey, this recording, and registration to the July 28th event that Steve just referenced. Let me read a few nice comments here, Steve. Joyce writes, thank you so much, Steve, for your wonderful tours of the national parks. At my age, I don't expect any more to get out to these parks. However, I've always wanted to visit, and your tours have now provided that experience. I can't wait for the next ones. Malini says, this was amazing. Thanks for letting us live through your experience. Nancy says, I love this. Thanks for all your interesting talks and photos. Mary says, thank you so much. Justine says, thank you so much. Linda says, thank you. This was wonderful. Looking forward to the next one. Francis says, thank you. Osmana says, thank you for the wonderful nature and presentation. Lois says, very interesting. The Southwest is far more amazing than I knew. Thank you. And we'll get to a few quick questions here. Lois asks, what is the temperature early in the morning in New Mexico if it's 105 during the day?
obviously it depends on what time of year you're there, but I was there in August and a t-shirt was fine. It doesn't chill down to the 50s at night and then heat up. There's not that much of a transition. Actually, 2 weeks ago, I was out in Arizona and New Mexico, and maybe low 60s first thing in the morning, and then it got up to high 80s, low 90s. So a light covering would suffice to get you, and then you'll just store that in your backpack as the day warms up.
Christopher asks, is 56 degrees in Carlsbad natural or human regulated?
Oh, and that's Mother Nature that decided that that's the temperature point. It's natural, and it's bizarre because it's pretty much wherever you go. You can go to Wind Cave, which is up in South Dakota, and it's 56 degrees underground year round. It never changes. Crystal Cave out in Sequoia is at 6,000 feet elevation, and it's 56 degrees. So most caves, that's your constant temperature.
And Anne's going to finish us off here. You referenced you were just in New Mexico and Arizona 2 weeks ago. Anne wants to know, where is your next adventure?
Well, actually, one of my sons and I formed a adventure travel company. So many people get back to me and go, how do I get you in my backpack when I go to visit these places? You know so much about the places. I want you along. So we said, what the heck, give the people what they want. And in next month will be our inaugural trip out to Moab, Utah. We're going to explore arches and canyonlands and the Goblin Valley State Park, and out in the eastern section of Utah is where I'm traveling.
Joan says this was really informative, well organized, and interesting. Thank you so much. And Kim also says, thank you. This was awesome. So Steve, why don't we wrap it up there? We will see you in about a month. Again, folks, look for that email from me tomorrow. I want to thank Steve. Steve, you have any last words for the group?
You mentioned at my age, I may not get out there. I don't know how old you are to make that comment, but trust me, they've made national parks very accommodating to the Winnebago crowd. You don't have to go out on 5-hour hikes out into the backcountry to see our parks. There's scenic vista turnouts that are there for reasons in most of the parks. So sure, they're pretty accessible. Stay tuned if you want to see pictures, because I'll go out and show you what the wilder parts of the parks look like, but feel free to make your plans and go visit the parks. They're yours. You pay for them. You might as well go visit them if it's possible. Yeah.
Good. That's a good note to end on. So folks, we'll see many of you next month. Thanks again, Steve. Everyone have a great day.
Very good.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.